whole process is video. And then every time we have a vote, which hopefully there won't be an awful lot of them today, it has to be a roll call vote. So we know exactly who did vote, who didn't vote, and what their vote was, okay? So, and with that being said, knowing that I have that senior citizen disease, CRSS, can't remember, anyway. I'll probably be the first one to break the rules, just so that you know. So with that, I'd like to do a roll call of who's here. I am Rick Fish, president, and I am attending from Bonita Springs, Florida. Sam?
Sam Gullo here, from Perry, New York, sunny Silver Lake.
Jim Brick, I'm here in Perry, New York.
And Dan Luer, and I'm here from Wyoming, New York. I am the secretary, I believe.
Jeremy Satchel, treasurer, and I'm coming to you from sunny East Aurora.
Good spot, Jeremy.
Yeah, right.
This is Jim Pierce from the Wyoming County Business Center here at the headquarters in Warsaw.
Kevin Zanner, counsel for the agency here in East Aurora.
All right.
Rob Neporowski, I'm with Labella Associates, coming to you from Buffalo, New York.
Hey, Rob. Does Robin need to say anything, or?
Please. Robin and Jennifer, you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, Jennifer Tishka from Colesville, New York.
Robin, are you there?
Robin doesn't want to play.
Is she muted, Scott?
No, she's okay to go. If she's watching on YouTube, there's about a 20-second delay so that you can stop things in case something goes horribly wrong.
Okay.
So just so the board knows, Scott is participating today because we're using his Zoom account, and as the board knows, we do contract with Scott for various marketing and technical assistance stuff. So we're grateful to Scott that he could join us today, and I'm sure he'll be entertained by today's meeting.
Hey, we're very serious, Scott. So
I know.
If it gets too serious for you, let us know. All right, so we're going to assume Robin has a few technical difficulties, but we know she's there. And with a quorum ahead, I will call the meeting to order.
Does Brian needs to introduce himself yet, correct?
Brian Beeger, Perry, New York.
There he is, yep. Is there anybody else I'm missing? We're all set. Okay, so with that, I'll call the meeting to order. The first thing we need to do is to approve the old minutes.
Sam Gullo would move to approve the.
Thank you, Sam. I need a second.
I'll second it, Jim Brick.
Thanks, Jim. Hey, by the way, Jim, can you say something again here?
Get it what?
I don't know about everybody else, but I get a hell of a view of the top of your head.
Oh. Yeah, I got to turn it.
I think he's got a piece of paper. There, that's better.
There, all right. Good job, Jimmy. All right, so with that, we need to vote on, is there any discussion on the minutes from last meeting? Having none, then we need to vote to approve the minutes. We'll start with you, Sam.
Yay.
You have to say Sam Gullo, yes or no.
Good.
Sam Gullo says yay.
Yeah, Jim Brick, yes.
Jeremy Satchel, yes.
Dan Luer, yes.
And the motion carries. And again, I don't vote unless there's a tie, right, Jim? I don't need to say that I vote yes or no. Correct. Okay.
We do record your votes, Rick.
You do?
Yes.
Okay,
We do.
sorry. I always thought I was only there for ties.
Nope.
In that case, Rick Fish, yes. I need a motion. We should just Any discussion on the financial reports that everybody got? It looks pretty standard to me. Jeremy, did you want to say anything about the financials or?
I didn't. I'm happy to walk through the line items if you desire, but otherwise, from an activity standpoint, traditional activity.
Yeah, they look just like they're supposed to right about now. So I had no questions. Did anybody else have any questions? With that, I need a motion to approve the financial reports.
I'll move to approve Jim Brick.
Thank you, Jim.
This is Dan Lower. I'll second.
Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion? Without any, then we will call for a vote. Rick Fish, vote yay. I get to vote first.
Jeremy Satchel votes yay.
Jim Brick, yes.
Dan Lower, yay.
Sam Gallo, yay.
Very good, the motion carries. Okay, at this point then, Jim, I'm assuming you want to do the loan request first rather than the environmental discussion, or do you want to do it according to the agenda?
Yeah, let's follow the agenda. That way we can turn Rob loose after he's done with his presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot Rob was on the call. That's right. I'm sorry. Then we'll definitely do the environmental report first. And Rob is going to let us know how he made out at our site.
All right, just a quick reminder, the board authorized the business center to spend up to $23,000 to conduct an environmental assessment on the former MK property located on Church Street in the village of Arcade. We have contracted with Labella and Associates, and the report is quite lengthy. So after a discussion with Rob from Labella, we decided just kind of to sift out a few key things from the report so that the board can make some decisions on kind of the next steps. I don't want anybody to go into a panic attack when they see the cost estimate for remedial activities. I'm not in any way committing that we're going to be doing that. Okay? Just so that's known.
That's good.
So with that, I'd like to introduce Rob Naparowski. And Rob, we appreciate you being with us, and let's go ahead and give your report.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I'm happy to be on with you guys this morning. So Jim had reached out to Labella last spring, and we helped to develop a strategy for addressing this derelict property. For those of you that are not familiar with the site, it consists of 2 parcels totaling about 10.5 acres and is occupied by a severely deteriorated building complex that encompasses about 57,000 square feet. Based upon our discussions last spring, repositioning of the site for private sector redevelopment was identified as the preferred route. The first step was accomplished last fall with the procurement of a court order granting temporary incidents of ownership to access the site for the purpose of conducting environmental assessments, basically with no responsibility or liability for the results. That paved the way for Labella to conduct phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments. The objective of these assessments was basically twofold. First, to determine the likelihood that the site would be eligible for entry into the New York State Brownfield Cleanup Program, which provides lucrative tax credits and liability protection for developers that clean up and redevelop qualifying brownfield sites. In order to get into the program, soil and groundwater contamination exceeding regulatory thresholds must be documented, and an application must be submitted to DEC for a formal eligibility determination. The second objective was to collect enough site data to enable the development of a preliminary cleanup plan and cost estimate to provide to developers, thus letting them know the level of site preparation, environmental remediation required to ready the site for new construction. So we completed the assessment this past winter and did achieve these objectives. I'm just going to kind of run through a summary of the results and conclusions, and then I'll give you a rundown of our recommendations for next steps. The phase one that we completed looked at the site history, regulatory records, and observable physical conditions, and identified a number of environmental concerns, including the use of the northeast corner of the site as a filling station as early as 1944, including the potential presence of underground storage tanks. We also identified use of the remainder of the site as a dairy processing and manufacturing facility dating back to 1912, with components that included machine shops, a paint shop, oil house, etc. The presence of drums and containers of unknown substances was identified throughout the complex. Areas of stained soil were also observed, and the presence of asbestos within the remaining structures and demolition debris on the site was identified as a concern. Our phase two site assessment involved the investigation of these concerns and included subsurface exploration and the collection and laboratory analysis of soil and groundwater samples to enable comparisons with the regulatory thresholds. This included the collection of surface soil samples, excavation of test pits, and the drilling, installation, and sampling of groundwater monitoring wells. The results of this investigation revealed the presence of 4 unregistered underground storage tanks ranging in size from 500 to 4,000 gallons in the area of the former filling station. In the area of these tanks, we also discovered petroleum impacted soil and groundwater, and the sample results of these media indicated levels above the applicable standards. As a result, a spill was reported to the DEC. Additionally, we identified fill material of unknown origin across the site to depths of 7 feet below grade. The chemical analysis of surface and subsurface soil samples identified concentrations of metals, including arsenic, lead, and mercury that exceed the DEC soil cleanup objectives. Additionally, other contaminants, including some semi-volatile organic compounds and PCBs, were detected at levels above the soil cleanup objectives in the fill material. In addition to the chemical contamination detected on the site, previous surveys reviewed during the course of our assessment documented the presence of friable asbestos within the demolition debris located on the western portion of the site, as well as friable and non-friable asbestos within portions of the remaining structures. So based on these results, which documented the presence of soil and groundwater contamination exceeding regulatory thresholds, it appears that the site would be eligible for entry into the brownfield cleanup program. Again, a formal eligibility determination would be made by DEC following submittal of a complete BCP application. So we're just expressing our opinion of the likelihood of eligibility, which we think is high. Labella used the data generated by the investigation to develop a preliminary cleanup approach for reuse of the site for restricted residential purposes. And that's based on some feedback we got from stakeholders. They expressed an interest in having some sort of possibly senior housing facility or other housing facility on the site. So our approach consists of the proper decommissioning and removal of the 4 underground storage tanks, excavation and offsite disposal of the associated petroleum impacted soil, in situ remediation of petroleum contaminated groundwater in that area, controlled demolition of the existing building complex and debris, limited excavation, removal, and offsite disposal of contaminant hotspots in the fill, placement of 2 feet of clean cover soil in areas of the site that will not be covered with impervious surfaces such as building foundations and pads and parking lots and roadways during redevelopment. recording of an environmental easement on the site, and implementation of a site management plan, along with compliance with other requirements of the brownfield cleanup program. As Jim mentioned, our rough order of magnitude cost estimate to implement this remedy is about $1.9 million. Again, that's a rough order of magnitude cost estimate with an accuracy of plus or minus 50%. So in terms of our recommendations for how to move forward, one thing we recommend is keeping the TIO open for now. Our understanding is that that can remain open until such time that the work is complete. We've issued a draft report. The report has not been finalized, and we would recommend keeping that TIO open for any future activities that you might want to conduct at the site. We would also recommend confirming our interpretation of probable BCP eligibility through a pre-application meeting with the DEC. They are willing and open to sit down with potential applicants to review the merits of the application and the site. That would involve providing them with a copy of the report and conducting a meeting just to get their feedback. I think that would be an important step just to kind of confirm what we've interpreted in terms of eligibility. At that point, you'd have the option to move forward with an RFP process, or alternately, you could prepare and submit an application for formal determination that can provide more certainty to developers. If you were to move on to the RFP process, we would suggest starting with a request for expressions of interest to gauge a developer interest in the site. And depending on the results of this process, move into an RFP process for redevelopment, or identify other intermediate steps that may be needed based on the developer feedback from that initial expression of interest. Concurrently with these steps, we recommend that the asbestos conditions be reported to the New York State Department of Labor with a request that the US EPA conduct a removal action to address the friable asbestos that's commingled with the demolition debris on the site. This could expedite the removal of this hazard and help to eliminate one of the complications associated with redevelopment, essentially lightening the developer's load. That concludes my summary. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
This isn't, the last time we got involved in one of these environmental impact things, the EPA tried to make us pay for stuff that we never authorized and didn't, we're not going to get into that trap again, are we, Jim?
No, what we did was, as an organization, we applied ourselves for getting into the brownfield cleanup program. So we bore the costs of that. And as a result of that, some of the testing and analysis that the DEC did during the process, they were charging us for that. In this particular case, we're looking at having a developer move forward with the application, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to benefit from the tax credits that are available through the program.
Great. Does anybody see anything wrong with Rob's recommendations there?
Rob, this is Sam. Can I ask a question? How long do you foresee this cleanup taking?
The process to go through the BCP program is typically about 18 months. Now, I've seen them done quicker, and I've also seen them take longer. It would depend on, the approach that the developer and their team puts together.
I probably should share with the board as a little background about the asbestos mixed with the construction debris is that there was a contractor that worked with the property owner, the estate of the property owner, and was basically given verbal permission to go in and remove scrap and salvage materials from the facility. And in exchange, he would take that, and that's how he was going to get paid. There was no money transacted or anything. So unfortunately, the only one building had a legal demolition permit through the county. And they went a little rogue and actually took down more structures than they were permitted under the original demolition permit. So the company's name is Carrier. They're located near Syracuse. So when we reported the hazardous spill to the state, as we were required to by law, we also shared the name of the property owner with the DEC, and they always seem to try to chase those guys first for getting things cleaned up that they have been involved with. Since that time, the contractor, the salvage contractor, has been in many more times and removed other stuff without permits. And he has been given a stop work order by Don Roberts at the County Code Enforcement Office here in the county. And it's my understanding, as of this week, the contractor finally removed all his equipment from the site, and the village is installing a safety fence around the facility for fear of liability issues. So some of this problem was caused by a contractor who just didn't have the proper permitting and was just in there trying to grab what he could.
So who actually owns the property?
It's owned by the estate of Howard Kravitz.
Okay. What did Carrier have to do with it again?
He worked with the Kravitz estate.
He was the contractor?
The contractor contacted the estate and said, can I go in there, and in exchange for demolishing some buildings, I'll just take the salvage value out that I get.
This has no relationship to Carrier air conditioning.
No,
Okay.
no, there's no, I don't
Well, you
know.
said Carrier and then you said Syracuse, and the only Carrier I know in Syracuse is a huge corporation.
I wish it was them.
I wish it was too. That's why you got my interest. Okay.
Rob,
so-
this is Jim Brick. What did the TIO, what did that stand for?
Temporary incidents of ownership.
Oh, okay.
And just so the board knows, the county actually was, they're in a position, and they started some foreclosures, but they do not have title or deed to the property. But under that temporary incidence of ownership, they are allowed to go to the court and take that position and then assign anyone they choose to access the site for the purposes like we did. So right now, Rob is suggesting we keep that TIO open in case we want to do anything additional there. But it's actually a court order that allows us in there.
I'm assuming they're 9 million years behind on their taxes and everything else, but the county won't repossess it because of the environmental hazard.
You got it.
Hey, Rob, this is Dan Luer. I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Sure.
Given the degree of contamination on the property, is there some concern that there could be potential leachate going into the Cattaraugus Creek that runs adjacent to that property? I know it wasn't tested, but
I think there's a possibility that the site could be impacting water quality in the creek, very locally. We did document groundwater contamination, and we would expect that the groundwater in that area discharges into the creek. There would probably be some level of dilution. We didn't necessarily identify any, visible issues associated with discharges from the creek bank or, in the creek itself, but it's certainly possible that it could be contributing some level of contamination to the creek.
sure. The reason I ask is, does that type of leachate contribute to a higher priority in terms of remediation or concern from the DEC?
Well, I would say yes, from the standpoint that the DEC has an open spill file, and under normal circumstances would be compelling the owner to deal with that contamination, and they would probably prioritize this site because of its proximity to the creek. In situations where the DEC cannot get a response from the owner, they will, at times come in and handle the work themselves and then try to recover the costs. But I think that if there is some indication that the site may enter the brownfield cleanup program, they may be satisfied that it's going to be taken care of through that program.
Okay, thank you. The other question is, along the lines of remediation of the site and then future use, does that potentially preclude the construction of retention ponds for things like driveway and pavement runoff, and as those might contain contamination? Or, I'm just wondering whether or not the site would be restricted from further development.
I would say no. I would say, any development plan would be dovetailed with the cleanup under the brownfield cleanup program. So if there's the need for stormwater management on site, which there probably would be, the area of stormwater management would be addressed through the remediation, and that might include, lining the detention pond with clean soil or some other mode of stormwater management.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
One of the recommendations that Rob has made is the friable asbestos that's into construction debris. He and I and Kevin talked about the potential liability of not reporting that to Department of Labor, especially given the fact that the creek is nearby and the Arcade Elementary School, you could hit it with a stone from the site.
I was going to say I would like to see if somebody would make a motion to accept that we do what Rob is recommending for us.
Can I just, Rick, this
Yep.
is Sam. Can I just ask one question before we get to that motion?
Sure.
This is to Jim. Can you give us any information on the potential developers at this point and how real they are?
Well, I have talked to Peter Krogh is one developer that has done projects in Wyoming County. And when we were first thinking about looking at this project, I actually went into Orchard Park and sat down with him. He's a well-known brownfield developer and has done many projects in the brownfield program. And he instructed me at the time that he may have an interest, or others may have an interest, he said, but without finding out what is there, they're not going to do anything with it. So that's why we took this first step to do this testing, so we could determine what is there. And I think one of Rob's recommendation is to reach out through a kind of an interest inquiry to other brownfield developers, sharing some of this information and kind of measuring the interest in this. I think the recommendations he's making are good, but do I have an answer about it? Is anybody standing in line waiting, especially given the current epidemic that we're having? I don't know.
So Jim, this Jim Brick, so the 1.9 million he mentioned for the cleanup, that would be the cost to the developer, not us, correct?
Right, that's what Rob has proposed.
Yeah.
No, just so the board knows, I'm not obligating any more resources, financial resources at this time, other than trying to push this down the road a little farther and do as kind of Rob has recommended. That's kind of what I'm looking at.
Well, and I also get the opinion there that we're maybe borderline negligent if we don't tell the EPA what we've done so far, right?
Well, as of today, this is a public record, so we're live streaming on YouTube. So
I think we should accept Rob's recommendations, move forward, see if we can find any developers that would be interested. To me, I think in the scheme of brownfields, $1 to $3 million cost to fix it is relatively low for brownfields. I think.
That includes the demolition as well.
Yeah, and that's in the center of our manufacturing bonanza town in Wyoming County with the cheap electric. I would think you'd get 2 or 3 developers standing in line to grab that. Pre-epidemic.
Sounds like you have an interest, Rick.
Yeah, nope.
Wasn't he talking about available space earlier when we started?
Yeah, I was, Jim. I was. I'm gonna get in there and open up a new manufacturing company in there. All right. Can I get a motion from somebody?
This is Sam. I'd make that motion.
Can I get a second?
This is Jeremy. I second that motion to utilize the recommended steps provided by Labella in their report.
Wonderful. And I will start the roll call vote with myself. I vote yay.
Sam, yay.
Jeremy Satchel, yay.
Jim Brick, yay.
Dan Lure, yay.
Motion carries unanimously, and we will, Jim, you will take care of following through on Rob's recommendations, and we will keep the TIO in place, right?
All right, I would ask Rob if you would please send us over kind of a bullet list of your recommendations so I can share it with the board as part of the record for the minutes as well.
Sure.
Thank you. And Rob, you're welcome to.
Thank you very much. Yes.
You're welcome to stay with us if you'd like, but otherwise, I'm sure you got other things to do.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rob.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, that takes care of that. Any last thoughts on that? Or just anybody? Nope. All right, next item, the next action item is our one and only loan request for this meeting. What do we got here? Datum Works.
Thank you. This is Brian Meager from Birchwood Consulting. This loan request is from a company called Datum Works. It's a startup business. They provide software consulting, software development, and training on a contract basis, primarily to the manufacturing industry. Their primary focus is on multi-access machining equipment. I think most of us are familiar with CNC machines, Siemens machines, et cetera, that manufacture high tolerance metal parts primarily. They're located down in Portageville, New York. The loan request is for $45,000. We're suggesting that it's an 84-month term with a 60-month balloon, 2% annual percentage rate. The client's monthly payments will be about $575 with a $13,000 balloon payment at the end of 5 years. The owner has about 10 years of experience in this business. He's a graduate of the technical college down in Alfred, currently working doing this same type of work for McQuillan Manufacturing out in Honeoye Falls. He has been a contract programmer for companies such as General Motors, Delphi, et cetera, and has quite a good reputation in the industry. His plan is that as he develops this business, he's going to continue to work full-time at his existing business until such time as he generates sufficient cash flow in order to begin taking an owner's draw out of this business. The money is primarily to purchase a software package that's manufactured by Siemens. It's no different than an accountant having to buy a financial package or whatever. And this software will be used to develop the code that gets loaded onto either Siemens or CNC machines to actually manufacture the parts. So we're looking at a loan here of about $45,000. The total project is about $15,000. He's got about 18 to 20% equity into this. On your handouts, you can see the summary of his personal financial statement. The primary difference between what he submitted was strictly in the valuation of the property versus his estimate versus the tax assessed amount. When talking with the client, he talks about significant interior improvements that have been made to the property, plus converting a barn to a commercial grade facility, etc., commercial grade garage. So as outlined here, you can see there's a range of equity in the property, and without getting a full interior appraisal of this property, I probably can't get too much closer on the value. So his equity in the property ranges anywhere from about $10,000 to approximately $50,000 on this property. You can see the summary of his tax returns. They've been very consistent. There's really nothing to note in the tax returns. You'll see that the income went up significantly starting in 2018, and that's when he switched jobs to his current employer. He received quite a substantial pay increase by switching businesses. Personal credit history is pretty much impeccable. There's no history of anything derogatory there, very few inquiries. He did not submit a credit score, but based upon my experience, I'd estimate his credit scores in the high 700s, low 800s. Very, very strong from a personal credit perspective. From a marketing perspective, he's going to market primarily through trade associations he attends at, trade publications. I've seen some of the marketing materials and the advertising that he's got in prototype form. It looks like it's pretty targeted. It's obviously targeted to a technical, community, not to a consumer community, but it looks pretty solid.
He has a very narrow market, so that's.
I'm sorry?
He has a very narrow market. It's not like he's going out trying to get a retail operation going.
Yeah, it's a very narrow market, Rick. And talking to him, he says right now with this lockdown, he's getting so many requests for business because people can't get people into their facilities to do a lot of this. And he says he wishes he'd done this several months ago. He says he could really be, working full time at this right now, significantly.
Yep.
He provided a 3-year cash flow. It's summarized at the top of page 5. I do have one classification here. Under expenses, I talk about loan principal. That should say total loan payments. I'll make that correction and get that over to Jim later today. His estimates for the first year look pretty reasonable. Years 2 and 3, from my perspective, look to be a little bit on the aggressive side. But that's assuming that he generates positive cash flow in the first year and brings on anywhere from 2 to 4 full-time employees. Plan to market primarily in Western and Central New York, and as the business grows, move into Northwest Pennsylvania and the very southern part of the province of Ontario. He's not taking any owner's draw out of this until he leaves his job, and his plan is to continue at the existing job for at least 6 to 12 months. We already talked a little bit about hiring 2 to 4 employees, and I've sort of outlined his base billing rate, but that rate may change on an individual job based upon complexity of what the requirements are.
Hey, Brian, this is
Yes.
Sam. Maybe you get into this down farther, but just was wondering what his projected revenues are for the 3-year period.
If you take a look at the top of page 5, there's a chart on there on the financial forecast. And the third line down in the chart shows the sales for each of the next 3 years.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. And like I said, I think the first year is pretty reasonable, but 2 and 3, I think, are a little bit on the aggressive side. The good part is, even if he doesn't meet those sales forecasts, he has more than existing cash flow and assets to continue the repayments on this loan. So it's actually pretty low risk from that perspective. So the
Yeah.
positive factors,
I think
he's got 10
addressed-
years of experience. He's got a degree in technology. He's going to continue to work his full-time job. You see what his base salary is there. With the investments already he's made, he's contributed about 20% equity, and his personal credit is extremely strong. It's impeccable. Negative is the fact that, you know, working full-time, he'll be stretched a little bit thin as he's developing business. Depending on the valuation of his residence and whether you use the tax assessed value or his estimates, you know, it's questionable as to whether or not there's enough equity in the property to cover the balance on this loan in the event of a default. I think the event of a default's relatively slim, but you never know what could happen. And then I think I already hit it.
If there was a default, you just garnish his wages anyway.
Rick, I talked over you. Could you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
I said in the event of a default, with the amount of money this guy makes on salary, I think all you would want is a garnish on his wages.
Absolutely.
Rather than his house, that who knows what's going to happen to property values.
Right. And you also got there would be some liquidation value from the software package also.
I bet you not much.
You know, it'd be minimal, but there would be some salvage value there.
Yeah.
And given the summary of the positives, the negatives, his credit history, his experience, I think we should go forward with this loan. I think we'll be looking at a personal guarantee from the individual. We take a lien on his residence in Portageville, and we also get a security interest, a UCC1 filing on all his software, furniture, fixtures, and equipment of the business. And just to point out, although he is married, the property and all the assets are primarily in his name only. His wife seems to have minimal financial involvement in any of their ownership. So with that, I recommend we obtain a motion for approval of this loan request.
Brian, Jim Brick, are we the only source of financing for him? So we're on first with all this stuff?
That is correct. Now, there is an existing first mortgage in his home, so the lien would be in second position, Jim. But as far as new money going in, we would be the primary lender.
Again, I say if anything goes bad, we're not going to want to worry with his property. We'll just garnish his wages and we'll get the money back.
You're right on point.
Hey, Brian, this is Dan Lohr.
Yes, Dan.
So this software is very specific to an application. He's going to pay for all software licensing fees and update fees throughout the term?
Yes, that is the plan. After the initial investment, the $40,000 investment in year one, annual maintenance fees run about $7,900.
Okay. And those are calculated into his expenses?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Yep.
So
Any other questions from the group?
This is Jim Brick. I'll make a motion. We approve this loan.
This is Jeremy. Yeah, this is Jeremy Satchel. I second it. I think this is as strong a deal as we're going to see in this program.
I totally agree. I'm going to ask Sam at this point what he's any punches in the holes here, Sam, or are we?
If you're looking for a vote, I have a strong yay.
Okay. So in that case, we have a motion and a second. We'll start the roll call vote with Sam's yay, followed by my yay.
Jim Brick, yay.
Jeremy Satchel, yay.
And Lohr, yay.
All right, there we go. We have it all. Jim, you want to take care of finishing up our paperwork here? Brian, good job. We approved the loan. That sounds great.
Bring us some more of these, Brian.
Yeah, Brian, go find 20 of those for crying out loud.
Yeah, this is as good as I've worked on in quite some time.
Yeah.
Good job.
One of the things,
and I bet you the kid does really well with it too.
I was just going to add one of the
program.
Yeah.
One of the things that should be noted, he is a graduate of our fast track program.
That's what I just said.
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so all set, Brian. We're all done with you, big guy. Next, we have updates on our microloan program. James, or is that Robin?
Well, I'll start off with it. I've asked Brian to stay on if he'd like to, because when we get down to talk about the disaster relief loan program, Brian helped us work on that as well. So,
Okay.
I guess to really jump into that, at the last board meeting, it was just when this COVID-19 had really started taking hold, and I think that was the last hurrah we had, was our last board meeting. And at the time, the board kind of authorized us to look at establishing a small micro loan disaster relief program, and had set aside $100,000, and with the understanding that we would provide $5,000 per loan application. So I had drafted up a application, and Brian helped us polish it up a little bit as well, and we sent it off to council. But after talking with council a little bit about this, we decided to sit on it because we knew that the PPP program was coming out, and that businesses wanted to apply for that. You know, that is pretty much a portion of that is a forgivable loan program, versus if they get our $5,000, it's all loan. So we waited to see what happened with that, and I think everyone knows the program ran out of funds already, but now just last night the House voted to approve some additional funds for that, so that's still going to go on. So I think what we've been thinking about, and I've run this by a few people, and that is, since there are some disaster relief programs out there that are pretty good products, that maybe we ought to turn that $100,000 into a relaunch loan program, kind of with some of the same parameters, that we'll give them a loan up to $5,000 based on a personal guarantee, a provision that they have, you know, if they weren't able to get the PPP, that would make them eligible for applying for this as well, and kind of keep in place the same items that we had talked about, which were, for the first 6 months, there would be no principal or interest payments. Starting in the 7th month to the end of the first year would be principal only payments at 0% interest. And then starting in the second year to end of year 5, it would be principal and interest at 2%. And then again, we would just ask for a personal guarantee. So that's kind of what I wanted to throw out to the board for a discussion piece. We really haven't had a big call for disaster relief funding, especially given the CARES Act and what's been put out there for that. Our thinking is when these businesses get ready to relaunch or to reopen, they're going to be short of capital, and we want to try to retain as many of our businesses as we can. So with that, I'll turn it to the board for discussion.
I'll jump in. This is Jeremy, if that's all right. I had the opportunity to chat with you a little bit about this, and I think this is a great idea. I think to earmark those funds for a relaunch would be very beneficial to businesses in our community. I fully support it.
Yeah, Jim, this Jim Brick, is $100,000 going to be enough?
Well, we do have additional cash that we could look at shifting around. You know, if you look at our financials, we're in pretty good shape.
My only question would be to our attorney, and that would be and just from governmental things that bit us in the butt before, if we create this fund with an initial tranche of $100,000, we could easily up that to 200, 300, 400 if we needed it, right? That would be easy once we and then my biggest concern is, if we establish it, is there any regulations about, we go a year and we never needed any of the money, is that now somehow earmarked into something that would be hard to get our hands back on, or anything like that? Or is there any concerns to that whatsoever?
I think you guys have a lot of flexibility in how you want to put together a program like this. I would suggest, and I've had discussions with Jim on the concept, it really comes down to putting together almost some loan program guidelines. And I do think it's important that, you give yourself maximum flexibility to, if you are having a lot of interest, to increase the amount of the allocation. It's
Right.
probably going to be a board decision either way. And I do think that there's probably got to be some sort of a sunset provision. When are we stopping to do this? Because the terms that that have been raised here are very favorable, of course, and for good reason. They have to be to react to the situation. But you may not want to make those loans in 18 months from now.
That's right.
Thank you.
Frankly, we're hoping we don't have to, right?
That's the point. I would think you'd want to make it a 12-month sunset period as of when the economy starts up, which would be, sometime in June. And then you could go to like August of 2021, where there's a sunset on the project. If people haven't applied by then, they don't need it. You know what I mean?
That's exactly right.
Good. And then that way it would automatically shut down the project if nobody borrowed the money. If somebody did borrow the money, then it's just a matter of getting the payments for who did, but it would shut down whatever was left over. Thank you. Anybody else got any thoughts on this? Sam, anything wrong?
Sam, you're muted. Sam, you're muted.
Unmute yourself, Sam. All right, never mind, and we're going to assume he's in agreement. Jim, are you in favor of this?
Scott, can you unmute him?
He can't unmute himself.
There.
There he is.
There, holy, Andy.
My thought was
You to be talking about not having no opinion on 100 grand, Sam.
I'm in full agreement that we should do this. I'm concerned that there are a number of small businesses that were on the edge anyways.
Yes.
And this could be the reason or their reasoning to call it quits. And I'd hate to see that. Every small community has these businesses.
Absolutely.
If there was ever a program that made sense for us, this would be one of them.
All right, fantastic. So then,
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
yes, sir.
This is Dan Lure.
Yeah.
Yes. Is there a way to target this program to maximize job retention? So that we can target it to those businesses that have employees and and have a higher proportion of individuals who are currently out of work. Do we have that flexibility?
I don't know exactly how you would pull that off, Dan, but my own personal opinion is the larger the business was beforehand. So for example, Sam's Family Furniture has been around a long time. He has more employees than most of the small businesses. He's probably going to be fine versus the guy down the street with one employee who was hanging on, they were in their business. I was explaining to Jim Wednesday when I was chatting with him. My sister-in-law just bought a restaurant last July, and she has a staff of 24, which she's been in business now 9 months and has had zero revenue for the last 6 weeks, thanks to the governor of New York. Now, the 24 people that she has, they're all on unemployment right now. She has applied for the PPP. And if she gets it, and if the economy starts back up, restaurants are going to be one of the hardest hit because of the social distancing. Once they reopen, it's going to be very difficult for them. So I think basically to try to pinpoint where to get the money to, I don't think we can all anticipate at this point which businesses are going to be slammed the worst than other businesses. I like your point, though. I like employee retention, definitely. But I think the guys that are serious about staying in business, whether they have 1 or 10 employees, they're going to be coming to us either way.
Keep in mind, this is only $5,000. It's
Yeah,
not going to go a long way for a bigger company.
I agree. Yeah, that's true, Dan. Yeah, $5,000 is a drop in the bucket. I'm almost wondering if we want to change anything, if we want to change the amount of the loan from 5 to 10 or 5 to, up to $10,000-$15,000.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, Rick. I think we need some flexibility there.
Yeah.
You better up the pot then, because that doesn't give you that many businesses that you can work with.
I'll just throw this little bombshell out there. I would up the pot to 250,000 with a maximum loan per business of $15,000.
The city of Rochester has a program that we looked at as well. They're doing $10,000, and I think 15 is a little high. I think 10 would be a better number.
I agree, Jim.
Hey, you can always go backwards, boys.
This is Jim Brick. Maybe Sam, do you know the village was going to have a program in Perry too, weren't they? For some of the businesses, they had a fund they were going to help them with.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where that stands at this point.
Brian has been working on that with them. So Brian, you can jump in.
Yeah, there was a draft of that program circulated this week. The trustees and Rick Hauser and Matt Jensen got some input. We got a new draft out yesterday, and they plan to take that to the trustee meeting this coming Monday night. It's $5,000 limit to a particular business, $25,000 in aggregate. If a person owns more than one business, there's approximately $110,000 in the fund. Be 0 interest rate, first payment deferred for a minimum of 6 months. That can be extended if sanctions stay in place longer. That's sort of a high level summary. If you wanted to see details of it, I'd want a quick check with Matt before I distribute it to you, but I got a draft here of both the application and the proposal.
I think that's good. Thanks for the summary. Yeah.
Jim, can we commit to up to 250,000 for this program, or is that going to cause a problem?
I would defer to our financial people in the office. So I don't know if Robin or Jennifer would like to weigh in on that, but we do have some CD investments that we just seem to keep carrying. But the financial report that was handed out today, I think we got some extra cash on hand that we could.
We definitely have it. I think, Sam, is your point, are we getting in trouble by going so high?
I'm just want to be conservative and make sure that that's not going to cause a problem with something else down the road.
That would be like somebody else coming in for a business loan. We wouldn't have the loan to them because we've already sent it out.
Well, these are unprecedented times, and I think assuming a little bit of risk associated with a loan program is not going to hurt us in the long term.
Yeah, I agree, and as I think, sadly, that it's not like under normal circumstances we have a flood of businesses running into Wyoming County asking to borrow money. But my prediction is over the next 6 months to a year, if you're going to try to start a business in that period of time, God help you. And so therefore, I think our money is probably going to sit idle here as far as requests go. Thank God the last request we had was a beauty. But I think our money's probably going to sit idle here for a year. And I can't think of anything better on this planet than to try to save one of our local businesses from drowning. And I would recommend that whoever makes the motion, we go for a 10,000 per loan limit with a $200,000 kitty. That's just me. What do I got wrong?
Yeah, I would make that motion, Rick, Jim Breck, but you know, maybe we ought to be able to raise that $200,000 limit if it looks like we need to.
Yeah, that part I think we can do if we have to. As the attorney said, I think it would be easy to add money to it later on if we want to. It sounds like some of the local towns and villages are going to help in also. We may create this fund and never have anybody apply for it. Who knows? But my heart breaks for everybody. My sister-in-law, 9 months in business. She's in hock up to her eyeballs to buy the place, and she has zero cash flow. Those people need help desperately. So,
So just one quick question on this. Would there be any restriction for a business to apply for this loan, for one in Perry, possibly one someplace else, so they get themselves into a position where they've almost over leveraged themselves with these loans?
great question, Sam. I know on the PPP loan, because I helped my sister-in-law fill it out, it asked you point blank, I certify. I have not asked for money from anybody else.
Or if you did, for example, the EIDL loan, you have to acknowledge that and figure that into the calculation. I think if we could do an application, something similar to the PPP application that has some certifications, I think that would be
That would be
something.
great. Yep,
Yeah.
that would be great. Yep.
The other piece that the PPP application addresses, which would go along with kind of what Dan was saying with respect to employee headcount on the application, it asks you to list your current number of employees, and so it would allow you to track a retention, employee retention, if we factored something like that into the application as well.
Good. So we have a motion. We don't have a second yet.
I think a little more discussion before we might,
Yeah,
if we
if
could.
we get the second, then we discuss. And
Okay.
Then, okay. Who's going to second?
Well, this is Jeremy. I'll second the motion.
Fantastic. So then my thought is, now that we have the motion, I think if Jim, if you work with Jeremy to kind of pluck off the parts of the application that he sees on the PPP, so that we don't get in the jam that Sam was talking about. You got, most of these people are going to be good people. If you applied for 6 different loans, you're either desperate or you're a scamster. And I think we have to sort out the scamsters.
I think the other detail we certainly need to factor in, it was part of the discussion earlier, is the application timeframe. That's got to be, that needs to be established ahead of time.
Okay.
So there's a maximum loan amount I'm hearing of 10,000. Is there a minimum you want to set?
1,000?
Yeah.
Up to 10,000.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Up to 10,000. Yeah. $1,000 minimum, up to 10,000. Yeah. Any other discussion on the subject?
Are there going to be any qualifying factors to determine, are we going to underwrite it traditionally from a cash flow standpoint? We got to help Brian out here from an analysis standpoint. How, if every application comes in at 10,000, are we just going to rubber stamp approve them at 10,000? Or I guess I'm looking for a little bit of guidance there, or insight on that.
I guess my vision, Jeremy, is that in the application, you'd want them to sort of outline what they're planning to use the expenses for.
Sure.
How much for payroll, how much for rent, how much for marketing and advertising to kickstart the business, things like that. And I probably got 7 or 8 different categories that I'd want them to sort of document along with the name of the payees. The question really becomes, though, how do you enforce that? And like on a normal loan, frequently Jim's employees get invoices and then they pay for $10,000. I don't know if it's worth setting up those types of procedures. I think maybe we just go ahead and take the business owner at their word that what they've documented is accurate. And if at a later point we find out that it wasn't, they used it for some other funds that we didn't think they wanted to use it for, have a provision to be able to call the loan at that point.
And similar to the PPP application, there's an estimated use of proceeds that.
Yeah, exactly.
So something like that, I think would be great.
Yeah.
So
This Jim Brick, we got money for the airport, the FAA, but it's supposed to be used for employees or utilities and things like that, or we can't do capital projects with it.
should we have anything in here to say we have the right to audit how these funds were used?
It's always a great thought. It's tough to track and monitor.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're going to, but just have the right to.
The language.
Well, that's a great question, Sam. I think in terms of setting up your program, I think it would be helpful to identify for your borrowers what they can use the money for. There are similar programs in Erie County where the Regional Development Corporation through ECIDA, they have a working capital disaster relief fund program, and it's specifically for working capital. So you're not going to buy buildings with it. You're not going to expand your build. This is really for your basic operating expenses, which is different because most of these loans, at least for that organization, are equipment based. So I think you do have to identify what you want your borrowers to use it for. And I mean, working capital is a pretty broad category.
Yep, I agree, because I think if the spirit of this is a restart program, you would want to identify that you are going to spend the $10,000 on the dilapidated inventory that you need to buy new lettuce so you can make sandwiches and open your restaurant, that type of thing. You know what I mean? So I think we need to be specific that these are restart loans. And to Dan's original point, now that I'm thinking this out, we don't really, the number of employees and so on isn't nearly as important as how are you going to spend this money to restart your business?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the vendor portion of this is far more important than anything else. These are the only categories that you can spend it on: inventory, marketing, whatever you would need to get to put ether into the carburetor.
So this is Dan Lower. Rick, let me ask just one question, if I may. So let's say, for example, if I had a brick and mortar business like a restaurant, and I just don't see any light at the end of the tunnel here, but now I want to turn my business into a food truck where I can perhaps go out and serve the public as opposed to have a sit-down restaurant type deal. Could the funds be used to reinvent my business to that extent?
$10,000 won't go very far to reinvent, but
yeah, I hadn't thought it through quite that far, Dan, but my thought was, and I'll call it a modification of the current business model. For an example, you're a restaurant and you have no takeout capability. Money can be spent in order to establish some type of a takeout capability. If you're a retailer and at some point they allow curbside sales of retailers, that a retailer could make some type of a modification in their system, in their process, to allow curbside pickup, curbside delivery. So I'm just calling that as a modification of the current business plan. I didn't get as far as going to a major capital purchase of a food truck or anything like that. I don't think that'd even be feasible with a $10,000 limit. I mean, I financed a couple food trucks over in Livingston County in the past year. You're talking upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 for something that's fully equipped. So I don't know if that helps or if that just raises more questions, but that was sort of my vision for this.
No, I think that helps a lot. And I think that, I think if anything, that could be a serious consideration for a lot of businesses that they have to modify. If you want to do the best that you can do to try to survive, if you're a restaurant, for example, you've got to figure out a way to do takeouts or deliveries, and you've never done it before. So business modification is an excellent tool for this. And $10,000 can go a ways for modification.
I would think if somebody wanted to reinvent their business, they'd have to come in and apply for a separate loan, just like they would normally.
Sure, and our normal loan program is always open anyway. Yeah. Yep.
If we have any money left.
If we have
Well, I know the board has always been a little critical about when we're going to spend some of this money, that we kept stockpiling it. So we were saving it for a rainy day, and the rainy day's here.
Rainy day is here. All right, any other further discussion on our loan program? Our new loan program. All right, then I will start the voting with myself. Rick Fish votes yay.
Sam Gullo, yay.
Jim Brick, yay.
Jeremy Setchell, yay.
Dan Lurie, yay.
And the motion carries unanimously. Very good. Jim and Jeremy will get the application, and Brian will get the application portion worked out, and some of the finer details, and then we're off to the races. And my guess is I can't believe New York is going to be the 50th state to open. So we probably have a few weeks to get this done. So.
Yeah, Jim.
I think I will continue to, go ahead, Jim.
How are you going to get this out so people know it's there? Are you going to let Scott help you, or, you know?
Yeah, Scott's our PR man. He just got a thumbs up.
Beautiful. Okay.
I think what I'd like to do is Brian Beeger has a copy of this because we've been working on this jointly, and maybe Brian, you could maybe marry some of the things that you think are good from the Perry program into what we had put together. I still think we're looking at the same terms. I didn't hear anything to change that. And then we can run them by Jeremy to see if it incorporates some of the PPP stuff. I know Jeremy's going to be buried for a few days here, so we'll leave him out for the time being.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay, good.
Jim, that's something we can probably do in the next 24 hours, is get another draft out to you, Jeremy, whatever.
Okay, thank you.
So can I just, one last question. Are we restricting this loan to people that have not applied for other loans, or are we not? What's the plan on that?
That's a good point.
My suggestion is, if we have to prioritize, give priority to people who have not received money from PPP or borrowed recently. But if they borrowed recently, you take that into consideration just like you would in a normal underwriting process.
Yeah, I agree, Brian, because I know for sure there are going to be people that are not going to get PPP money or EDIL money.
Right.
Because they're too slow on the trigger to get the application in.
Yeah.
And the government ran out of money to give to them. So there are going to be people that need this that aren't going to get those. But on the other hand, I do agree with Sam. If I just got $70,000 worth of PPP money, and now I'm asking the village for 5 and the PPP for 10 and this and that, I'm going to wind up with a whole tranche of loans I can't pay.
Yeah. Jim or Jeremy, I'm not aware that with what Congress passed yesterday, the EIDL funds have been reauthorized. I just don't know. Do you, either of you know?
I don't either. I've been looking for some guidance on that, and I haven't found it as of yet.
Okay. Because I know that fund's been dry for a week now.
Yes, sir. And I based on the way that they had to give the money, my personal guess is that it isn't there.
I guess I have a follow-up question for the board. about, I don't think we ever discussed an application fee. I assume the board wants to waive that.
I do.
Yeah.
And the second point is, do we want to go through the normal approval process for these with Brian doing a underwriting and then bring it to the board for decisions, or is there another process that that you want to follow?
I think it needs to be, I don't know how to facilitate this, but I think we need to have a quicker methodology to approve the loans than to wait for us to get together as a board. And maybe we could have, authorize somebody on the board to kind of help oversee quick decisions to give these failing businesses a shot in the arm. That's my thought.
I agree with you, Rick. I think, we got to give the board some discretion here. And I think, my recommendation would be between Brian and Jeremy and Jim. That they can decide.
I agree, Dan. I think that's an excellent point. I have 100% faith in those three, that if they thought that this company deserves the 5,000 or 10,000, approve it and then bring it to the next board meeting after the fact.
I'd also just like to make an observation, and maybe I'll want to chat with Jeremy and Jim about this a little bit, but I see the methodology of underwriting having to change for these loans a little bit. Number one, you're not going to be able to get current tax returns. And most of these small businesses, they haven't even filed their tax returns yet now with the extension that's out there. Number two, you look for a current cash flow statement. That cash flow statement is not going to be at all representative of what's really happening today.
There's the cash flow.
Yeah. So I think we're going to have to take an approach where this is primarily based upon forecasts, which are going to be, I think, looser than in the past, because they aren't going to know when sanctions are going to be relieved and when the economy is going to start rebounding. And number two, we're going to have to put a much greater emphasis on the personal credit scores, knowing that even those are going to be at risk given the fact that their overall cash flow is disrupted. So it's not going to be a typical underwriting like we've been doing in the past for these loans.
That leads me to a question about guarantees. What are we doing with guarantees on these?
I would certainly think you want to maintain personal guarantees. I just don't see making these on a totally unsecured basis. I'd want the personal guarantee. If there's any ability to take a UCC1 filing on the assets, maybe. I think that's something we should consider, although I'm not I'm not extremely confident that we're going to find enough assets out there to secure if they're already loaned up.
Or not.
I would say on the collateral question here, you guys do typically grab mortgages. That slows things down. If you're trying to get money on the street, it's nice to have that as collateral, but it does create more paperwork difficulties. One of the reasons they're doing PPP is unsecured, is they don't have to do any of that stuff.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
I think if you really after this, if you could just have a one-line personal guarantee.
well, we would do, I think, Rick, we'd use our typical guarantee. I think where we decide to use collateral, that's easy, that's an agreement, right? Doesn't have to be recorded anywhere. You sign it with your loan agreement and you're on your way. Doing a mortgage and doing all the title work that accompanies making sure that you have the appropriate lien position is an additional expense and does take more time if you're trying to hit the street quickly and get the money out.
Well, it's an expense that does not necessarily warrant a $10,000 loan amount, because by the time you pay the mortgage tax, the title work, the filing fees and all that, you're probably running up $1,500 to $2,500 legal bill, which is 25% of the loan amount. So it just doesn't, I don't think it makes financial sense to go that route.
Yeah, I think the only guarantee would be a personal guarantee.
Rick, I'm sorry, could you repeat yourself? I didn't hear your comment.
I think the only paperwork that we want to get involved in is a simple personal guarantee, or what the attorney was saying, whatever is the standard.
Agree 100%.
Already, yeah. Nothing that we take 2 weeks to research, file at the county courthouse and all that other stuff, not for $10,000.
I have also been working with Scott on a daily basis throughout this whole crisis. And I know Scott looked like he's biting his tongue over there and would like to add something to this discussion. So,
Oh,
Scott?
you had just asked a question about what the Congress did last night, and I have it here on the, I have it. So if you wanted to know, on the Paycheck Protection Program, they added another 310 billion. That's on top of the 349. They added another 50 billion for the SBA disaster loan program.
Ooh.
They added an additional 10 billion in funding for the emergency injury disaster loan program, the EIDL. So those are two separate ones. They also expanded eligibility for ag enterprises with under 500 employees. So that was new. And then there's a bunch of public health funding money in it, but those are the three pieces that got refunded last night. They also, Jeremy, probably of interest to you, 30 billion carve out for community financial institutions, small insured depository institutions, and credit unions with less than 10 billion in assets.
That's good news.
This is Jim. Scott, you mentioned the agriculture. You know, the dairy farmers are headed down the wrong road again.
Right.
Prediction from some of the local farms, they've had to cut the production 15%, and they're looking at between $10 and $11 milk in June. Just so everybody's aware of what's going on there.
Yeah.
I thought I heard the president the other night on one of his, well, on several of his nightly briefings, that he has already approved a whole bunch of farm money.
Yeah, there was something about that. I don't know what the total figure was, but
It was like 50 billion was what I.
There was an expansion. I don't have the number, but they were slowly rolling it out. It was not moving as quickly as the PPP or the EIDL. It's a little bit different fund because it's going out through USDA.
I think the number was 19 billion.
Yeah, that was it. Yep. Yep.
That's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, I agree. But at least it's, I mean, they're already thinking about the farms. So,
Yeah.
So they were included, and they were also included in the EIDL, which was newer. They were previously not included in that.
so they
Just as kind of an FYI, I have a farmer on my board, and he's losing $85,000 a month, just in loss of revenue. So you can see how that money could dry up very quickly.
Yep. It's all proportionate. Every business is getting slammed with this. The weird thing about this is there are no exceptions. I don't care what your business is, you're getting it in the puss. And, you know, this is unprecedented what's going on. Of course, we all make it through it. With that doom and gloom,
Can I suggest,
next item?
Mr. Chairman, can I suggest a motion here? If the board is asking to, or is authorizing to delegate to
Yes.
Jeremy and Jim and Brian, the decision-making on these loan programs, there should be a motion and by the board to approve that delegation as we move forward.
Thank you, sir. Anybody want to make that motion?
Mr. Chairman, this is Dan Lower. I would be happy to make that motion.
Thank you, sir.
Jim Brick, I'll second it.
Thanks, Jim. Roll call vote. We'll start with, well, actually, before the vote, should we have any discussion on this?
As long as Jeremy is willing.
Yeah, absolutely. I will be occupied here for a bit, but happy to review applications and underwriting as they become available through Brian and Jim. Sure.
Thank you very much.
And I don't think we're going to have any applications for the restart program.
Yeah.
Probably 4 weeks anyway.
Agreed.
No, that's okay. Hopefully the heat will be off you by then. And then we'll start the roll call vote with myself, Rick Fish, vote yay.
Sam, yay.
Jim Brick, yay.
Jeremy Satchel, yay.
Dan Lower, yay.
Very good, gentlemen, unanimous. Okay, now with our As long as our attorney agrees, we'll finally move to the next agenda item. The micro loan deferral.
Yeah, just a quick update for the board. We did offer a 6-month deferral to our micro loan borrowers. The majority of them took us up on that. There were a couple that just decided to run out and pay off their loan, like the Spotlight Theater. And then we also have a loan to the pharmacy in Attica, who's going to continue on with his payments as well. So everyone else is taking the 6-month deferral. Just wanted to, and they were greatly appreciative of that. So I just wanted to share that.
Home run. Okay, so did you say Spotlight paid off their loan?
They will by June.
Wow, awesome. It looks like that loan worked. Anything else on the microloan program?
Could I just add, this is Jennifer. I just wanted to add that Canaan's is still continuing to pay through direct deposit, which is great.
Cool. Very good. Okay. Next item is the fast track restart. James?
Yeah, I'll also look to Jennifer to add something to this. We've tried a couple times to reschedule and get the class going again. We only had 2 sessions in, and so we're going to try and do another restart of the fast track program on May 19th. And Jennifer, you have anything more you wanted to add to them?
No, not at this time. I haven't rescheduled all the guest speakers until it gets a little closer to confirm that this May 19th date will work for us. And if for some reason the May 19th will not, we're just going to push it out to our fall class.
Kind of related to Fast Track is a new program that we are doing. It's called the Business Accelerator Program. It's kind of the next step up from Fast Track New Venture. It's for small businesses that are looking for that little more technical assistance and maybe customized assistance based on where a business is in terms of their business growth. So we're looking to, again, use our same facilitators from Fast Track to do kind of customized training. And we're looking to roll that out in the spring of 2021. And we're going to keep the classes small, where there maybe will only be 4 businesses, and they will work collaboratively with each other with facilitation. And so in order to try to get some funding for that program, Jennifer has been working on a grant application for the Wyoming Foundation, and of which Scott Gardner is on that board of directors as well. So we're hopeful that we can get a little money, maybe as much as $5,000 for that program. We intend to run it side by side at the same cycle as the Fast Track New Venture program.
Sounds fascinating. Okay. Any other thoughts on Fast Track before we move on? Is there any other business, folks? All right, the next meeting will be announced by our wonderful leader and director, James Pierce. And with that, I adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. And it went pretty good for our little first time on technical things.
Yeah, thank you to our host, Scott, for pulling us all together.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
Hey, Rick.
Everybody.
Yes, Sam.
I'm assuming Nancy is the one sister-in-law you were talking about?
That is correct, sir.
Where did she open her restaurant?
Alden.
Alden.
And then again, just to really double up on her bad luck, as if she didn't have enough bad luck. 9 months in business. I can't even imagine this back when we started CNR. 9 months of business, boom, 0 sales through no fault of your own. And then you happen to be located by 3 feet. By 3 feet, she's located in the 3rd worst county in the state, Erie County.
Oh,
She isn't going to get to open her restaurant until September.
ouch.
I mean, it's catastrophic what's happening. So, and the food business is definitely, of all the industries I've tried to think through, the food industry's taken it the worst. And it's funny, again, as in most things in the food industry, the sublime and the ridiculous, drive-through businesses like McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell, Down here, the line goes out 3 miles to get in there every day because you can't go to a restaurant, okay? So those businesses are well purported. They have benefited like crazy from this, okay? Pizzerias that are doing the pizzeria delivery that they've always done. When I talked to my ex-partner Craig, he was saying that most of his delivery restaurants are booming right now. But any restaurant that's a normal diner, family dining, white tablecloth, they are getting killed. So, and it's going to be a long time before they are back to being able to serve full capacity of their restaurant. You know, Nancy's capacity is 125 seats. When she reopens, due to the social distancing regulations, she won't even be able to seat in half of the restaurant. You would be, you're going from 125 down to 60. No, she's going down to 45 due to the weird shape of the floor space of the restaurant. And in order to keep the 6 feet, boop, 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 she's only going to be able to seat 45 people at one seating, and that's it. So it's a nightmare to try to work your way through this thing.
Yep. All right, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Have a
Thanks,
great-
everybody.